Welcome to Dhaka Tribune presents Straight Talk with Zafar Sobhan. Thank you for tuning in. My guest today is Dr. Gowher Rizvi, a man who needs no introduction either inside Bangladesh or out. He has had an illustrious career as a historian, scholar, and educationist, and has for the last 9 years served as the International Affairs Advisor to the Prime Minister of Bangladesh. Dr. Rizvi, thank you for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you, Zafar. Thank you for having me on your program, and congratulations on your new talk show.
Well, it's our pleasure to have you, and thank you for your congratulations. I think let us jump right to it. The big issue on everyone's mind right now are the upcoming elections. I think everyone, be it in the government, be it in the opposition, be it the common man or woman in Bangladesh, would like to see a participatory election. So how do you think we are as far as that goes? There have been recent meetings between the PM in the Awami League and various opposition alliances. Do we take that as a good sign?
Indeed. Let me be very, very clear. I
Sure.
do not see any reason for any anxiety. Elections will be held
Yes.
as stipulated under the Constitution.
Of course.
And there will be no impediment whatsoever, legal, political, constitutional, for all the parties to participate in the election. From that point of view, I have absolutely nothing to worry or add. Now, the question is, will it be free, fair, or participatory? Now, in the past, one of the main opposition party has always said elections are not fair. But if you look at the history of the last 10 years, not only at the two general elections, but all the elections taken together, every time the same complaint is made. The elections, will it be fair? Will it be participatory? Well, the opposition parties have participated, despite saying we will not participate. They have won the elections, just as they have lost in many of the elections. So I think we should move away from this negative state of mind. Rather than that, let's concentrate, get on with the election campaign, make your case before the public, put forward a positive manifesto and campaign program, and we shall have a good trip. At the end of the day, it is the choice of the people. Which way they will vote depends on them. The ruling party is confident that it has got a good track record. It can speak to its record and hope the people will support. If they don't, it is their choice, because Bangladesh is a democracy.
Of course. And I think the tragedy, you could say, of the last election was that it was indeed boycotted. So people really didn't get that chance to make that choice. And I think there's been a lesson there for the opposition. I think they're probably not going to make the same mistake again, because of course when you do that, you in fact deny the public the right to choose. And I think, as you mentioned, that's a very important thing.
I think, Zafar, you have made a very important point. You know, if you are a political party,
Yeah.
and you represent the people, you do not have the option to boycott elections.
Yeah.
Let me go back a little bit. There was no dispute about the elections that took place in 2008.
Yes.
Yet, one of the major parties boycotted many of the sessions of that parliament as well. Here is a fundamental misunderstanding about your democratic and constitutional responsibilities. If you have sought the mandate of the people, if the people have voted for you, you have an obligation, a contractual obligation with the voter that you will represent them. In the same way, if you are a political party, to say that we are not going to participate in the election and deny your supporters the opportunity to vote, it is in a democracy an unforgivable both moral and political act.
That's right. It breaks the faith to a large extent. I dare say in the context of a country like Bangladesh, so many of the things we have seen in the past, be it boycotts, be it the culture of hartal, which used to be very prevalent and now thankfully is hopefully a thing of the past, one could say that these are signs of sort of immaturity politically, and hopefully we're moving beyond that. Now, do you then feel confident that the BNP, let's put a name on it, will come to the election? I mean, I think that's what the country would like to see.
Personally, I'm very confident that BNP will come to election because I do not believe they have an option other than to participating, because BNP is also a democratic party. So they have to abide by the democratic rules of the game. To make the same mistake twice would be suicidal.
Yeah.
And I cannot imagine the leadership of the BNP will allow or make the same mistake.
Absolutely. I mean, if you cast your mind back to 5 years ago, this time, or maybe a few months earlier, this time in 2013, the BNP was in a very good state. They had won 4 city council elections. They had done very well in local elections around the country. And popular opinion polls showed that they were in a good position. They had absolutely no reason to boycott the election. And instead, what they did, and it's not just a question of boycotting, they in fact chose the path of confrontation, violent confrontation in the street, and eschewed sitting down and negotiating. I think a lot of things were put on the table by the government at the time in terms of how the elections were to be conducted. Now, a lot of the demands made by the opposition then could not necessarily be accommodated. Doesn't mean all of them couldn't be. So this is why I think the fact that opposition parties are sitting down and talking. We've had the Jatiyo Oiko Front, we've had the Jukto Front, both speaking in recent days with the Awami League and the PM. This is a great sign, surely.
Absolutely. And the government has shown its openness. They are listening to what the leaders of the different parties are saying, and they are at least beginning to respond to some of their demands. But let's talk a little bit about the demands.
Yes.
There are 2 types of demands.
Sure.
One is which involves making constitutional changes, and one that involves the legality.
Sure.
Now, I think unless BNP emerges with 2/3 majority, to demand constitutional changes will not happen.
Sure. That's a practical matter.
You should demand what you can achieve. Sure. Politics is the art of the possible.
Indeed.
In the same way, certain things have been decided by the courts of law.
Yes.
You cannot turn that into a political discussion or a political negotiations. There, you have to go back to the court, follow the legal procedure, appeals, perhaps even go so far as to make a clemency application.
Appeal.
But those are not negotiable, and some of the opposition leaders, amongst them are eminent jurists, understand this. However, that said, the government can and will make other efforts to ensure that all the parties are comfortable in coming to the election.
No, absolutely. I mean, when you have a negotiating position, I think even the opposition, if they were being honest, they would say that, look, these are our negotiating positions. You don't expect every single point to be acceded to or agreed to. You lay it on the table, the ones the government can deliver, in wish to deliver, they will, and maybe some they will not. That's negotiation.
That's one way of negotiating. A pragmatic, sensible way is to negotiate what is possible.
That's also true.
It is, as I said, politics is the art of the possible. If you pitch your demands too high, you are setting yourself for failure. And a sensible leader, a pragmatic leader, a statesman does not set herself or himself for failure. So, where both sides are completely agreed is that both want free, fair elections.
Yes.
And we should be talking
But how we can get
how
those.
we can ensure that,
Yeah.
and talking with each other, not at each other.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay. On that note, we'll cut it short for a second. We're going to take a short commercial break. Please continue to tune in after the break for conversation with Dr. Gowher Rizvi. Thank you. This is Dhaka Tribune presents Straight Talk with Zafar Sobhan. I'm in conversation with Dr. Gowher Rizvi. Thank you for tuning in. Dr. Rizvi, as we were talking earlier before the commercial break, politics is indeed the art of the possible, the art of what is practical and can be done. On that note, let me ask you a question. What do you make of Dr. Kamal Hussein's recent alliance with the BNP-led opposition alliance? Do you think that's a good thing for Bangladeshi democracy? How do you see it?
I would obviously I have never commented on an individual, and I do not intend to comment on an individual. But any activity which stimulates democratic activities, which encourages people to get back to the electoral process, is most welcome.
Yes.
So there is no question about it. The fact that the formation of Front, Jukto Front and others have stimulated politics, dialogues have started, and if you look around the country, people, even before the parties have decided whether they are going to contest or not, their supporters have decided that they want to contest the election. And therefore, I think this is a useful way of going forward.
That's right. And one of the things that Dr. Hussain had mentioned earlier on at the start of the alliance, before sitting down and negotiating, is he had mentioned very clearly, he said that even if the demands which they are going to be raised for the conduct of the elections are not met by the government, they will still participate. I think that's very helpful. I think that's very useful. And I think if that will also help bring the BNP into the process, that's also something which is helpful.
Absolutely. You see, election is a huge opportunity and a moment in our democratic life. This is an opportunity to educate the public on the issues facing their country, to revitalize your political party, to build up your base, and the ultimate outcome depends on the voters, over which none of us have any control. And I think there's another important issue perhaps we should talk about. We are too focused on gaining power.
Yes.
The more important question is, what do you do when you have gained power? That is where the discussion should be. You should present to the public a manifesto, a program that is credible and the one that public will buy it and say, yes, this is a good program, I'd like to vote. That's where democracy thrives. That's where the purpose of general election is realized. Just acquiring power for the sake of acquiring power, I think, is a meaningful, futile exercise.
No, I think I would absolutely agree with you. So can we expect to see a manifesto shortly from the Awami League?
Indeed, there is Awami League has set up a very strong manifesto committee. Manifesto is being drafted. Extensive public consultation has taken place. Our leaders have fanned out around the countryside to hear what the public wants, their demands, their concerns, and you will see a very robust but deliverable manifesto. That is important. You do not want to promise the earth and deliver very little.
Now, do you think, looking back at 2008 and 2013, how successful do you think the Awami League government has been in delivering the promises of its earlier manifestos?
Now, obviously, whatever I say, you will perhaps say I am being partisan. At the risk of being called a partisan, let me say this, that Bangladesh in 2018 is a very different Bangladesh of 2009 when the Awami League came to power.
I think that's apparent to anyone who lives here.
The country has been transformed. You look at every social, political, economic indicator.
Yes.
The country has been transformed. And one thing our leaders must understand from all political parties, that people know when good things are happening.
Sure.
And when they are convinced that the good things are happening, they may choose to continue with it. On the other hand, if they feel disappointed, they will have their opportunity.
Certainly, the government's development track record stands there for anyone to see, and I mean, I think, as you said, the figures will point it out. But I wonder sometimes is that, development is one thing. It often seems to me, though, that on various counts, the public is, as you said, their faith perhaps in governance is not what it used to be. Why or how would that be, and how can that be addressed?
I think firstly we should avoid a false dichotomy.
Okay.
The false dichotomy is choices between development or democracy.
Of course.
That is absolute rubbish.
Indeed.
Not only it is rubbish, you cannot have development without democracy.
Absolutely.
Because by development, I mean sustainable development.
Yes.
And sustainable development is only possible in a democratic framework, in a framework where there is equitable growth and social justice.
Yes.
So that's what it is. Now, of course, nobody is saying that everything is perfect, hunky-dory, and we can now become complacent. Rebuilding governance institutions will take time. If you think about it, one of the sad parts of Bangladesh's history, a very large part of our history was under military rule.
Yes.
And what military rule does and did is they deinstitutionalize. They undermine institutions. They destroy accountability. They put too much emphasis on an individual rather than institution. And rebuilding this is not easy. Few days ago, the Prime Minister did say in the next term she will focus on dealing with governance issues, tackling corruption and other things which clearly the citizens do not like.
Okay. Thank you very much. On that note, we're going to take another commercial break. Please join us after the break. This is Dhaka Tribune presents Straight Talk with Zafar Sobhan. Thank you. Welcome back to Dhaka Tribune presents Straight Talk with Zafar Sobhan. I'm here in conversation with Dr. Gowher Rizvi. Thank you for returning. Dr. Rizvi, you had mentioned that moving forward after the election, the focus is going to be largely on governance, and perhaps that's certainly where it ought to be. What about the issue of fundamental rights? This is an issue which I think of late we've seen certain legislation passed, be it the Digital Security Act, be it the Broadcast Act, which has been mooted. And of course, there are long-term issues of reports of extrajudicial killings and denial of bail. This is something which I think people have been concerned about. Is that something we can hope to have movement on after the elections, you think?
Let me, the freedom of expression is a fundamental pillar on which our democratic societies have been built. So nobody is questioning that a principle. But when you are in the government, you have another responsibility to ensure that the lives and property of the citizens are safe. Today, it is very easy to incite people through mischievous, false news items, doctored, photoshopped photographs, and stir up sectarian feelings, violence. And mind you, it is not hypothetical. This has actually happened in Bangladesh.
Of course.
So when you are dealing with that, governments have to be prepared for it. Prepared for it. Because otherwise they will have failed in their foremost responsibility of keeping their citizens safe. So I would make that general point. Now, how do you balance that? Requires statesmanship, requires both sides coming together and saying, okay, let's have these rules, and how we can behave responsibly to make sure that these things don't happen. As technology is moving fast, we have seen in established democracies how so-called social, I use the word so-called social because unfortunately social media has become extremely unsocial.
Yes, antisocial, one might even say.
Antisocial. Now these are being abused, used, and to say that these should all be left unregulated, anybody should be able to incite a riot. Just because a law has been passed, it doesn't mean it cannot be changed.
Right.
Because laws are intended to reflect the will of the people.
Yes.
By passing a law, we learn through our mistakes. If there are some shortcomings, they can be amended. This is not the final word. There is no such thing as a final word. Otherwise, why are there parliament? It is the responsibility of parliament to
address these issues,
to take account of the views of the public, of the people, and address the problems as they arise.
My sense is that, part of the problem we face in Bangladesh, or part of the challenge the government faces, is that because, we have had in the past, the politics has not necessarily been as healthy as one would have hoped. And, we don't just have a sort of a parliamentary democracy here in Bangladesh, there's a lot of street politics as well. So the government needs to take steps to protect itself, to protect the people. My hope is that we're moving out of that, in that as Bangladesh matures as a democracy, then therefore there will be also more scope and more appetite on the government side to loosen these restrictions and controls. Do you think that's something we can legitimately hope for?
Absolutely. You yourself said we have made progress. The word hartal has almost gone out of our vocabulary. Yes. We are also hoping, after the bad experience of 2015, burning and killing will also become a thing
Absolutely.
of the past. In the end, the political parties who were supporting these acts did not give up because government suppressed them. Public disapproved of it. They realized that they were losing their support amongst the public. So public opinion curtailed that. In the same way, it's a evolutionary process. Constantly we are evolving, constantly we will go forward. But as long as we remain committed to the principle is freedom of expression.
Yes.
And as I said, with the caveat, but it must also ensure, we just have to make sure there is some sort of a harmonious balance and sense of responsibility.
No, of course. And if you look back at, for instance, the role played by the mainstream media, I think you'll have found that, for instance, after there was a lot of rumors which were flying like wildfire a few months ago in the wake of the road transport movement, in that there were a lot of rumors, it was actually the mainstream media which played the role of tamping it down and being very responsible. So I think that's a really good example of the media and the government working hand in hand. And I think there's no reason we can't continue to do that. Our interests, of course, are the same.
Zafar, thank you. This is exactly the point. This is the value of free media.
Yes.
Because free media also reflects the will of the people, interest of the people, interest of the society. And therefore, when the media saw that this movement was being exploited by various interest groups and antisocial bodies, they came in and helped to disseminate, dampen down the agitation, because people said, we trust our media, they are telling the truth. Even if sometimes we have doubts about the government, here is the media. So that's a very good example.
Super. Well, on that note, Dr. Rizvi, we're going to have to leave it here for this week. Thank you so much for being with us. This has been a wonderful conversation, and thank you very much for tuning in. I hope you will be with us next week. This is Dhaka Tribune presents Straight Talk with Zafar Sobhan. Thank you very much.